I guess one of the reasons for doing the show is I just want to show the listeners and our members in the FX Traders Club that you're not some silver spooner. You're not some whiz kid that went to Oxford or Cambridge at age 12 and a half. You are a normal guy and you've worked bloody hard to get where you've got, right?
No, I actually did go to Cambridge at 13.
Oh, wow. Really?
No.
You don't look that smart, so that's the case. You did it that well.
No, absolutely. I can say that for any intelligence that I lack, I've got perseverance and determination. No, I mean, I kind of bumped into trading, and it wasn't something that I, knew about until, my early 20s. But no, I mean, I've, of course, like everybody, got a degree, the usual stuff. But I started off really going to uni really just to have a good time, had no idea about what I wanted to do. So it's not like I figured it out when I was 14. Sometimes I'm speaking to like 14, 15-year-olds and they're like, they've got it figured out. They want to be traders. And I'd be like, wow, I wish I kind of had that back then. But, I discovered it probably properly like at 21, 22.
Okay. And that was back in 2003, right?
Yeah, 2003. That was really when it kind of kicked off. To be honest, I mean, I stumbled across a seminar and I basically just thought, oh, this sounds quite interesting. Had no idea what it was really about, but it was about making money, and I guess everybody wants to make money. And went to a free seminar, had absolutely zero intentions of buying anything. I just kind of went there just to learn some free information. And I basically was like, wow, this sounds like exactly like what I might want to do. So I kind of fell in love with the presenter, and I thought, wow, this would be great to do. But obviously, being a student, I thought there's no way I'll be able to do this. There's no way I'll have the money to do a program. So that was kind of like, in my head, it was like, okay, it sounds great, but I'm just going to go home and carry on with my life. And shall I say the rest of the story?
Yeah, this is your story. This is the interesting part. So let's just get this clear. So the scene is set. It's 2003. You'd been to uni. What were you studying at uni?
So I did economics because it was just a general subject that I thought, well, could be useful, might be able to get into banking. It's a decent degree to have. But that was literally it. I had no idea. I mean, I knew what supply and demand was, but that was about it. It was just like, sounds all right. But really, I was just kind of looking at the bars and the clubs that I could go to and moving away from home. So, yeah, and that's the honest truth. That's how I was thinking back then. I wasn't as committed, let's say, as what I am today and what I developed to be.
So this is really interesting. So take yourself back into that time when you were just thinking of becoming like a NatWest personal banker. I can't imagine you doing that. That would be hilarious to see you in one of those TV adverts, by the way. Yeah, so you're in that mindset. You want to make money. You don't really know about trading. What were your thoughts on trading before you got into it, or just as you started tapping around the edges? Let us into how you were with that. What was your mindset with that?
Well, I mean, like I said before, like I didn't know anything about it at the time I was choosing to go into university. I had no clue at all. I was just thinking, just like my parents taught me, just get a decent degree, get a nice paying job, and just build a career. It's pretty simple. That's kind of was ingrained in me growing up. And and then kind of after I went to this seminar and I got introduced to the idea of trading, it kind of opened up a different path for me. It literally, almost in the moment, it took me it took my mind to another path, another completely different path. Like it's almost like the receptors opened up in my brain that there was something else, a different way of doing things. And obviously back then I was quite naive about what was possible, you know, as most people still do nowadays. You know, it's over promoted about how much money you can make and how quickly you can make it and all that kind of stuff. But I was excited. I was excited about the possibilities of making money for myself, not having a boss. And yeah, it was just like this feeling of excitement, but also a little bit of like, I wish I could do this, but I can't. Like I was a little bit resigned, so I can't. Back then, I didn't have the mindset that I do now, that anything is possible if you switch your brain on and start being creative. But like, and that's kind of like, you know, and as you know my story of how I actually ended up going into trading and then obviously developed from there.
Can you share that? It's a really, it made me smile when you told me that story. So
yeah,
I think
well, because it's kind of like when we connected as well, which is like, you know, a long time ago. But the interesting thing was like, you know, my girlfriend at the time, who now is my wife, so you know, we've been together for a long time, but she was like, oh, you know, you'd be perfect for this, you should do this. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Like I don't have $2.5 grand. Like $2.5 grand seemed like an enormous amount of money back then. And she said to me, well, do you want to do the course? And I said, well, yeah, but there's no point in me having that thought because I can't do it. So she literally just walked off in a bit of a huff, to be quite honest with you. I thought, what's wrong with this woman? She went out of the room and she came back to me and she said, okay, I've booked us on. I was like, what do you mean you booked us on? Where have you got the money from? And she basically said to me, well, my mum has lent us the money, so we're both going on the program. So that was like, literally, I was like, wow. I was like, okay. And obviously I didn't know what to say, but I was like also really excited. And that's literally how I got started. I mean, it was the first introduction to trading. You know, I learned the basics. I learned what trading was about and the possibilities in my head. And I was super motivated. Super motivated.
Sorry, mate. You said you were motivated. What was your biggest why back then, if you could sum it all up, apart from paying your future mother-in-law back 2.5 G's?
Yeah, which I did, but like,
I should hope so, mate. You made 13 grand last week. If you still haven't paid her back, mate, something.
No, but I actually paid her back even back then when I was pretty poor. So I don't like to have debt, but no, it's a strange one. It's hard to think not of the why, but like, I guess the thing that motivated me, like if I can recollect, was the idea of freedom. That was one. Like which is, I guess, is a common one for most people, but it really appealed to me because I kind of didn't like to be controlled. So like I noticed myself when I got my first job, I was quite a creative person and I had really great ideas. What I thought they were great ideas to improve things, to make things more efficient, to do things quicker. Like I felt like I could do the job. If I could do the job in an hour instead of 8 hours, I would do it in an hour. Like, so I would always think of creative ways, but I felt like being in the corporate world, I was stifled. So like I didn't have that, and it kind of, this path showed me that actually I could have that creative side of me available to me. And that was one of the things. And the other thing, I mean, it's not a why, but like what I really loved about it was that it was really stimulating. Like, I don't know, some of the guys listening might kind of resonate with this, but I could just stare at my charts like for the whole day and time would just pass by and I wouldn't even realize that the whole day had gone. So I basically fell in love. So it's like, what, I can't tell you anything more. Like I just became absolutely passionate about trading and figuring this out.
At what point did you kind of know that you were on the right path, apart from falling in love? Because obviously we do that in life with money and with women or with men or with our partners. And sometimes we get caught up in the moment, but how did you know to sustain it and keep going even through, you know, invariably the ups and downs, such as life, right?
Yeah, I guess I was a little bit naive, and I, I was kind of sold the dream, and I was sort of told, well, if you do these things, you will have that dream lifestyle. And in a way, being naive did partly serve me well, but it also cost me big. But for the short term, it served me well because I was very, very disciplined, and I literally, I had some rules, not as strict and detailed as what they are today, but had rules. And if you go back, I still have my journal from back then. And if you see, it's super basic, but seriously detailed. Like every trade had like a paragraph of detail of why I got in, what I was thinking. And yeah, I was just, I guess, like naively excited about what I could do. And here's what I did actually, Gavin. I don't know if I told you this, but this maybe is a little bit advanced for because I wasn't taught this, but I was just thinking this way at that time. Was like, my thought was like, okay, so I again borrowed. I had £2,000 to trade. That was my account, and that was borrowed money as well because I didn't have anything. So I basically said to myself, okay, if I can do 10% a month for 12 months, that's statistically significant amount of time on a £2,000 account. Well, I should be able to do the same on a 20, on a 200, or a 2 million, or whatever. So that is literally was my motivation. I remember it really clearly. I thought, like, I have to prove that I can do it, and then I will find a way. I will find a way to get more money and trade more money. And what was what was challenging at that time was I actually, because I got my first job after uni working at Deloitte & Touche, which is a good company. I got sent to Luxembourg for a year, for as long as I needed, but I was there for a year. Good pay. And I quit because I basically was bored. And my father wasn't very happy, let's just say. And I said to him, no, I'm gonna focus on trading. That's what I want to do. And basically, I basically was making £200 a month, right? On average, that's slightly less, slightly more, but on average, it was just under £200 a month. But I was super excited about that, like super excited, because my thought was like, this means I can do it on the 20, on the 200, like I said before. So that was my goal. It wasn't like the money I didn't care about, because even then I knew £200 wasn't anything, but I lived at home. I didn't have a lot of expenses. So I could literally, I didn't have really any expenses. So I could just make £200 a month just to prove that I could do it. And, I was so excited about it that I had to just tell my dad. But obviously he was like, seriously? You just left a high-paying job and you're telling me you're spending the whole day in your room and you're making £200. That was literally practically his words to me, and basically made me feel completely like this big. But I was like, that's one of the things, and I'll say this to people listening as well. If you believe in what you're doing, you have to have conviction and not let others push you out of your path. And that's part of your challenge. That's part of your test. If you let somebody push you out, you're not ready for that path. So like, even like that sort of like, obviously that emotional bond with my dad, that emotional push, I was very determined that, no, this is the right thing for me and I need to stick with this and I will master it. And one day I'm going to make a hell of a lot more money than I would working for these companies.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Firstly, thank you for sharing that. I'd love to stay chatting with you about this, but obviously we've got a time limit to bear in mind. What we're going to do is every week we'll go back. So we'll go forwards another year. So next week we'll talk about 2004, and obviously how you progressed. And this guy is a very humble, very modest. For those of you that are just tuning in, maybe you're new to the FX Traders Club, you don't know everything else that Andy's done on his trading journey, but he's worked as a trader on the trading floors for some of the biggest hedge funds and banks in London and therefore the world. He's managed multi-million-dollar accounts. So to hear your story from 2003 and making £200 a month and feeling like this small to where you've got now is a really inspiring story. And we'll break that down every week and we'll go through it little by little, because I think there's some real golden nuggets in there. Every time I speak to you, sometimes, mate, you don't realize the gold that you're dropping. Most of it is rubbish, especially when you're talking about the Liverpool Football Club.
Don't make me go and get the football kit, mate, because I will.
Maybe
next week, mate. Next week.
Yeah, well, what's coming up this weekend? I don't want to know if we get hammered by you guys. But anyway, we digress.
We don't want to talk about that, mate, because that's going to be...
Shame on me. So next week, we'll go into a little bit more detail about your journey and get some more golden nuggets from you. But I want to move on now to one of your favorite trades or one of your favorite moments in your whole trading career, because obviously there's going to be many of them. If you can just give us one for this week's show, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall I tell you, like, it's a weird one, because, and people will think this is strange, but like, you know,
Don't say it.
Well, I'm going to say it anyway, because that's what you've told me to do. So like, like managing, you know, when I was in the last sort of hedge fund, we were managing very large sums of money, and you know, at some point, you know, I made a six-figure trade, and like, you know, in terms of profit, which is like, you know, crazy, like when you think about it.
Specifically, you say six figures. Can you remember the number?
123 grand, $330 dollars on a trade.
Okay.
And that was obviously, yes, it was, I guess you could say that was a good moment, because it was like breaking mental barriers, like of what you could do. But it's nowhere near my best trade. My best trade.
Wait. We'll keep that. Which one are you going to talk about? Carry on with the weird story first.
No, this is going to the weird, why I chose, why the reason why the trade that I'm going to tell you is strange. Why people, okay. you wouldn't think why I'm choosing that trade. The trade, basically, my first trade, when I got started in trading, where I made £200 in about 5 minutes. By pure luck, I'm going to tell you that now. Now I know it was pure luck. But honestly, I remember it like with like something shifted within me on that day. Like I realized how quickly you can make money. And I just remember, it's a really strange feeling. I was in my parents' house, in my bedroom. I was just basically shorts and a t-shirt, put my feet up, I placed my trade before. I was just relaxing as a young kid, as you do, just chilling out. And then all of a sudden I'm like looking at my trade and it's going crazy. And it's just gone bang, like straight to the profit target. And I made like about £200. And obviously at that point, that was a lot of money, like for the account that I was trading. But something in my head just thought, Jesus, like how, like there's people going to work and struggling, and I'm just sitting here with my shorts and t-shirt and I've just made £200. Now, obviously now knowing what I know, it was pure luck. Like it was like some news that came out, but it showed me like basically how easy life could be. Like, and it just shifted something in and I was like, that's the path I'm going. You know, you asked me before, now I think of it, that's when it shifted. It was that moment. I remember it as clear as day. I've taken so many trades, but that trade, I just won't forget it. Like, it was just like so, I don't know, memorable to me. Like, it was the first real winner that I ever had. And obviously, like I said before, I've made much more money in other trades, but they just kind of, it's just part of the process now. Once you've moved over to sort of that level, it just becomes like a normal thing. But that was exceptional for me at that time. So it's a bit strange, right? Like, to think that that's better than the trade that made me over 6 figures. But that 100%, this doesn't even compare. That trade wins hands down.
Cool.
Weird, yeah.
No, it's really, really interesting. It's really, really interesting. How did you feel? Obviously, I think we can all tell how you felt when you banked the 123 grand, but tell us how you felt before, when you were placing that trade to get to the 123 grand. Like, what goes through your mind when you're on a trading floor and you're trading that size of money in an account?
Like, when I first shifted over to that level, that was daunting. Like, it was like, okay, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't, like, knowing that, you know, because before my biggest account was like 300 grand, and then to go over into that sort of size where we had, you know, really high daily limits. So it was done a little bit different in the hedge funds. It wasn't like, you know, you've got a 10 million account. It was just like daily limits. So the better you were trading, the more limits you had. So it might be like, okay, Andy, you've got 50 grand today, or you've got 100 grand tomorrow, or you've got 10 grand or 5 grand. You know, if you were doing badly, you'd get less money. So at that point, my size was like, you know, 20, 30 times more than what I'd ever got used to. And that was daunting. Like, but I'd like to think that I'm very good under pressure. Like, it brings the best out of me. So I just adapt in my head, and I just kind of prepared myself mentally and just put my focus completely on the setups. And that's why it's important to have rules and the plan, those kind of things that actually you can just kind of focus on and not focus on the money. But once I got used to it, those numbers meant nothing to me. I could lose 20 grand or 30 grand or 50 grand. It meant nothing. It was just like nothing. Didn't matter. Like, I just could take the next trade without almost feeling numb about it. Didn't care. So it just became like a process that I built myself up to that moment. And that's how you grow from smaller accounts in your head. You just got to build it up.
Very interesting. A lot of people saying thank you so much for sharing. Profound. Other people have similar life stories. So yeah, really, really grateful for you.
I can't see any of the comments, by the way, so I've no idea if anybody's asking anything, but it would be good to know if people are getting value out of what we're talking about.
They are.
Otherwise, we can just talk about something else.
Really good question that's just come in, actually, which we'll save that one, actually. We'll save that one, Richard. So if I forget, just message in again and we'll go over that, because we are short on time and I want to get through as much as possible whilst we've got Andy here. Okay, so we've covered that section. And again, we'll go into more detail as the weeks progress. So let's now jump to the polar opposite side of the life of a trader, and tell us one of your worst moments that you've experienced.
Yeah, it's one of the worst, but actually in the end ended up being the best thing for me. So, you know, one of the things that trading does to you, you can either get to a point where your confidence is sky high, or you can get to a point where you are, you know, ready to jump out the window. So it's like two extreme worlds, right? And that's what trading. So when you allow it, trading can do that to you. So it's important that, you know, now I know that it's important to sort of bring those extremes in, so that when you win, it doesn't affect you, and when you lose, it doesn't affect you. So it's just like, hey, great, I won, or oh damn, I lost. So it's like, not like, hey, I won, and oh, now I'm going to kill myself. So it's like, you want to try and rein that in. And it's something I didn't really appreciate back when I, in my early years. So as I studied and I became better and better and better at trading and analyzing and predicting, my greedy eyes took over, and I ended up blowing a large sum of money, let's say in the six figures, some of you know. And it was really tough. I mean, probably the toughest period of my life, because I had gone from living a luxury lifestyle, nice cars, all the usual things that you do as you start to make money. It's just inevitable. People do it, especially when you're young and you want to show off. But yeah, I came back crashing down to earth, and I basically lost everything, literally everything that I built up. I blew it in a very short period of time, and I had to start from scratch. And I remember, and then you have to go and share that information with your missus, which was not a nice conversation. And and it was tough, and like I had to make a decision right there and there. And I said to myself, right, it was weird, like how I react to things. Like I would say if there's one skill you should learn, is how to react to adversity. And I just I was feeling a bit sorry for myself for a few hours, literally a few hours, not even days. I brushed it off and I said to myself, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go get a short-term position. I'm going to save up. I'm going to fund my account. I'm going to go again. And and it was just like an immediate reaction, like a step-by-step of what I was doing. It wasn't like I'm giving up. It wasn't like, none of those things were even going to be a consideration. And that's exactly what I did. And from that, that's how I actually got into really learning how to trade, because I landed a job in JP Morgan, and I ended up not having to use my savings. I ended up working myself just through perseverance onto the trading floors of JP Morgan. And, I would be like, every opportunity, just introduce myself, tell them what I was going to do, and like anything that basically became friends with the traders. And eventually they liked me and they helped me get onto the floors. And, and I did everything that I possibly could to learn off them like a sponge, ask questions. And that's how that was the first real experience of what trading was really like. And I got to learn from some seriously big hitters like that had been doing it for 30, 40 years. So so it was kind of like a really bad experience, but I believe every bad experience leads you to a path, and that's the path it took me on. And if it wasn't for that path, I would have just been stuck with what I know. I never would have ended up going to those firms and getting to understand how institutions trade. And I ended up trading for institutions for years because of it. And it was the best experience of my life, I would say.
So what's the big difference understanding, obviously, trading for institutions and what you'd learned before? If you can, obviously we'll go into more detail in the next few weeks, because I think this could be a whole show in itself, mate. But just as a top line for now, what was the major differences that you learned between trading in both of those worlds?
Huge difference. Well, firstly, it's the way they trade is very different. But also I understood what the institution needed to do, like as part of their game. So by understanding what their game was, because their game was different to the retail guy. Like, they were market makers. They traded differently. They used information differently. They had power to move the market, to trick the retail guy. So there were so many things we could do. Like when you've got money and you've got capital and you've got power, you can do so much more. So it's like a different game that they were playing. Now, obviously, trading with them, I was playing that game. But when I left that world and became, a retail trader trading for myself, because I understood their game, I could understand where the big money was going, like where I should be, and how I understood how they thought, exactly what they were doing. So when I see things on the chart sometimes, like I can immediately conclude things. And sometimes people will be like, how do you know that? Like, but it's like I remember it from seeing, like, if that makes any sense. So just like I know exactly what they would do. So I know what I should be doing. And that insight is a bit priceless. It's like you can't give that to someone, but obviously I try and share that with my students, through the coaching, through speaking to them, that kind of, through the education. I try and share that insight, but and they will learn to experience it for themselves as well.
Cool. Thank you again for sharing that. That's really great. So let's jump into a few questions. Richard's question was, how long did it take for your dad to accept you as a trader, basically?
He still hasn't. It's like, why do you get a real job? Why do you get a real job, son? Sitting there playing with your screens all day.
That's cool. So does he still? So now to this day, he doesn't accept you trading as a living, or he realizes?
Well, he doesn't really say much, but obviously he can see that I've done well for myself. So, but he'd never admit, oh, son, you did the right thing. So, like, because obviously, like, as you guys know, when you do something that's not normal, you have more struggle, don't you? So it's not like as plain sailing. It's not as comfortable. But I think, yeah, I mean, obviously he accepts what I've done now. I mean, I'm past 40 years old, so like, but like it's weird. Like I would still say, like, even despite what he sees, he would still probably say, hey, you should have stuck with your job, like, like your normal standard career. But
it just goes to show, like, that path of conviction. I think for anybody listening, if you almost, when you get met with adversity, it's kind of a way that you know that you're on the right path, hey?
Yeah. And I think, like, when you have that adversity, like I said before, it's there to challenge you. Like, I don't know, we don't want to talk, higher powers and whatever else, people believe in, but I do believe that for you to grow in whatever area you choose, you can't grow without challenge. So if you want to be a trader, you can't do it with the way that these people promote stuff. Follow my signals, you're going to become rich, 99% win ratio, this kind of stuff. You can't win that way because there has to be challenge. Like that, it's just inevitable. There has to be a challenge for you to overcome certain obstacles. So, but I firmly believe that anyone can do it if you accept that you're going to be challenged and you're willing to fight that adversity if it comes, and probably it will at some point.
Interesting. Another question that we've had quite a lot of this question from Sab. He's put it in the message again about your views on the so-called Forex educators who plaster photos of luxury homes, cars on Facebook, Instagram. What's your views on those guys? And obviously making, some would say that it's very misleading and it makes it seem easier than it is. What's your views on those types of businesses, should we say?
Yeah. Well, that I'm not like that, and and it's not to say that I don't like driving nice cars and having a nice house. It's just that I don't think it's right to almost insinuate that this is what you're going to have if you get into trading, because for some people they may not get a Lamborghini out of it, they may not get a mansion out of it. Some people will. You can do it, but for some people, it's just going to be a nice second income, you know. But the thing that I don't like about it is it lures people in who maybe are a little bit desperate in a difficult situation, who really need the money, and they shouldn't really be trading. And it's inevitable that they're going to lose money because they're not in the right space. So that's the thing that I'm really against. It's the, you know, getting people that shouldn't really be doing it right now involved in the markets, making them believe that, hey, your rubbish situation is going to be solved by trading immediately. But actually the reality is that, because as we know, trading requires some commitment, some work. And when you expect that money's going to come easily to you, well, it almost does you a disservice, because you're inevitably going to lose, because you're coming into it thinking, oh, this is easy. Okay, so I'm just going to start making money. Brilliant. So I can start paying my bills. And then when it's not happening, you're like, well, what's going on? It doesn't make sense. What am I doing wrong? Well, the thing you're doing wrong is that your initial idea is wrong. Like, you can't just, I'm not saying it should take years, by the way. You know, we've seen with a lot of our students in 2-3 months, how far they excel, but it's not going to be instant. Like, you can't just follow a few signals and start making, you know, $5,000 a month. It's so silly to think of that you can do that. But like, I guess when you don't know and you're kind of new to an industry, and then you're told, hey, you know, by this so-called expert that looks honest, that you can do it, I guess you think, well, if he says I can, then maybe I can. But, you know, it just doesn't work like that. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to sort of ramble on, but basically, yeah, that's the thing that I don't like. Everybody's got their right to do whatever they wish, but that's the thing that I don't particularly like about that sort of over promotion, let's say.
I think the world's changing on so many levels, as we've witnessed in the last few months. But I think the times that people are going and looking externally for that guru or for that expert to tell them that they can do something, I think it's time for us to take charge and take control of ourselves and our own destinies and say, this is what I'm going to make, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I want to do.
Yeah, completely agree with that. No, completely. Like, you have to try and have, you know, you've got to trust people at some point, but like, you've got to also think, you know, is this realistic, what this person is telling me? Like, you have to have some independent thought. Like, but you have to find a balance, because if you don't trust anyone, you know, you need support, you need mentors, you know, you need education. All those kind of things are really important. I've always done that. I've always invested, and you know, sometimes in a way, sometimes I would say you're better off investing in the wrong people than not investing at all, because actually, at least you're taking action, because the more you're seeking, the more likely you are to find somebody that's going to help you. Whereas if you just kind of like closed and you're like, no, I can't do it, I can't invest, or I can't risk anything, well, you've almost guaranteed yourself that you're not going to succeed at trading. So yeah,
that's probably why so many people's families are against it, because, you know, everybody wants that certainty. And just, if you're going to achieve anything in life, you've got to get comfortable with the uncertainty, right? And this story that you're saying is personifying that. Every day you would go in to the trading floors, or every day when you're trading, you just don't know what's going to happen. And obviously that's part of the allure, but it's also part of the fear and why people's emotions in psychology gets triggered so much.
Yeah, completely. And it's, I mean, personally, it's part of the thing that I enjoy. Like, strangely enough, I enjoy the uncertainty. Otherwise, I'm the sort of person that gets bored, like if it's too certain and too easy. So uncertainty actually is something that I enjoy in a kind of perverse way.
Have you always been like that as a child, or is it just something that kind of you've learned to do? Because Like I said, up until recently, everybody's wanted to be certain of things. And it's just now that the world's changing and everybody's realizing, okay, I've got to step out of my comfort zone now. And, you know, I speak to a lot of people and they're like, oh, I looked at doing trading 4 or 5 years ago and now's the time for me to do it. And it's really, really interesting to hear their personal stories. And I'm just wondering if that's something that you've innately kind of been born with, or whether it's something that you've developed.
I think it's a bit of both, actually, because I guess you could say by getting into trading back all the way back in 2003, I guess that was kind of like a different way of thinking. But I then didn't just kind of say, well, this is what I looked for more. Like I kept, like I guess one of the most profound things that I did early years was I went to UPW. I don't know if you guys know what that is, with Anthony Robbins and Unleash the Power Within. And that, I think that event made it really crystal clear to me who I was in this world. I wasn't going to be somebody who was just going to be a basic employee and listen to his parents because that's what they wanted him to do. Like he almost gave me that fuel and that power and the tools to pursue the path that I'd chosen. So I think it was nurtured, Gav. I think it was like partly inside me, but partly with my experiences. That's how I ended up kind of, you know, being pushed in that direction.
Interesting. And just a quick one: did you do the Cool Moss hot coal
Of
walk?
Of course I did. Yeah, that was great.
Walk. It was more of a Usain Bolt.
Yeah,
kind of just.
I think I did a cart. I'm sure I did a cartwheel. That's how I recollect it.
Do the caterpillar all the way up.
Did a little dance.
Try that one at the staff Christmas party. We'll get that whole setup done.